We're only one day away from NHL free agency. Today we're going to take a comprehensive look at all the players that are available for signing, broken down by position, and that's coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we are really close now to the NHL free agent period. Normally I would have liked to get this video out a little bit sooner, but given the tight time frames here between the draft and free agency this year, there just hasn't been quite as much time, because I certainly wanted to, focus a lot on the draft here leading up to it. But today we're going to do a comprehensive breakdown of the available UFAs on the NHL marketplace as of tomorrow, July the 1st. So we're going to look by position, start with the goaltenders, take a look at some D, some centers, and some wingers, see who is available out there. Now, we've heard a lot of people saying that this year's UFA crop is not the most talented. It's not the deepest group for sure, which is why we thought we'd have more trade activity with teams trying to address needs in other ways, because they just can't go to the free agent market for everything. There's just not enough deep talented players out there. So let's dive in and take a look, and we'll see what your teams might be looking to add on July 1st or beyond as these players seek new employment and find new contracts either with their existing or possibly, in a lot of cases, brand new teams. So let's start with goaltenders here. This is all courtesy of CapFriendly.com. It's easy to sort through and take a look at all of the free agents here by position. So this is ranked by number of wins for goalies last year, starting with Martin Jones in Seattle. He's most likely not returning, so there's an option. He has been inconsistent throughout his career. Penguins, Tristan Jarry, another option, frequently injured, but at times really good. Hard to say. I don't know that he returns to Pittsburgh, but there is a slim chance. You get the duo in Carolina, Freddie Anderson and Antti Ranta. Both split time last year. Both did well. I don't think they both returned to the Hurricanes. I think Kochetkov is ready for NHL action, so I wouldn't be surprised if one of them moves on. You get Jonas Korpisalo, who was traded to LA and a strong finish of the year. He has been linked to the Ottawa Senators. I'm not sure about other teams, but I think he will be probably one of the more value signings for goaltenders amongst this market. You got Cam Talbot in Ottawa, who's been told he's not returning. Jonathan Quick, another veteran, been linked to the Rangers. Eden Hill's expected to stay in Vegas, likely around a $4 or $5 million contract. James Reimer in San Jose, we know he's moving on. Brian Elliott in Tampa, not quite clear as of yet, but he might be moving on as well. If Semyon Varlamov with the Islanders, I think he's most likely going to stay, probably sign a 1 or 2 year extension for a couple $1 million a year. That's what I expect for Varlamov, but you never know. Things can always change. Halak and the Rangers organization, it's believed he still wants to play, and it was agent Alan Walsh has been pretty vocal about it, but it sounds like the Rangers might want to move on and find a new backup goalie. With the next crop of goalies that are a little lower level here, making less money or having less wins, you have Colin Delia in Vancouver, Alex Stalock in Chicago, Alex Lyon in Florida. I wonder what happens to him. He could be an interesting option. He might get more attention after what he did in the playoffs at the end of the regular season. You had David Riddick in Winnipeg, Thomas Greiss in St. Louis. Laurent Brossoit, I do wonder what his status is based on injuries. I think he would have a pretty good market, but coming off a major injury, playing a good stretch of good hockey, but then having another injury, I do wonder what that does for him. Again, Anthony Stolarz in Anaheim. Hellberg and Nedeljkovic in Detroit. I don't see Nedeljkovic returning. Hellberg, maybe. Eric Shalgren in Toronto, and then Michael Hutchison with the Blue Jackets, kind of round out 23 UFA goaltenders. So it's not a super deep crop with all-star quality. Now we're moving on to defensemen, and these are ranked by how many points they had last season. So you got Eric Gustafsson, who finished the year in Toronto, putting up 42 points. I think he'll likely get a decent contract, mainly because of the weaker market. You got Shane Gostisbehere as a good offensive option as well. Dmitry Orlov likely going to command the most money, I would think. I mean, he had similar point totals here in fewer games, had a real solid finish time in Boston, but Boston can't afford to keep him as much as they'd like. You get John Klingberg again on the market for the second straight year. Didn't really do himself any favors to get that long-term big money deal, so we'll see what happens with Klingberg. Shattenkirk, I wonder if he might remain in Anaheim. They need some help on defense. Don't know what the status is for him. Ryan Graves in New Jersey is going to be an interesting one. He is a guy who can certainly play top 4 minutes for the right team. If he's a third-pair guy, he's a really good third-pair guy. So to me, he's going to be an interesting option. I think there'll be a lot of interest in him. Yeah, Brian Dumoulin in Pittsburgh. Been through a lot of injuries, but still I think he's near the end of his career. Scott Mayfield as a right shot D is going to be interesting as well. Has been on a bargaining contract with the Islanders for some time, so we'll see what happens there if he moves on. Connor Clifton in Boston, again, another player who may have a hard time getting signed in the Bruins organization, but another right shot defenseman who has some experience. You get Oliver Ekman-Larsson, who was bought out by the Canucks, likely going to get a cheaper, shorter-term deal this time around, I think. You get Luke Shannon, Travis Hamonic, a couple of veteran guys. I know Shannon's trying to work out a deal to stay in Toronto, but as of right now, that has not been close to getting it done, and Hamonic looks like he's looking for a little more money than Ottawa wants to give him, but we'll see if they can come to terms. The next group, we have Justin Hall, another right shot defenseman from the Leafs. A lightning rod in Toronto. I don't know if he'll what happens with him. I don't see him going back to the Leafs. Radko Gudas will be interesting. Another depth piece, but a very physical guy who was big and important for Florida's run. Ian Cole. You got Nick Holden, Dmitry Kulikov. Carson Soucy will generate a lot of interest. He apparently is coveted heavily by the Canucks. We'll see what happens there. Mark Stahl. You got Matt Dumba, who didn't have a great year, but right shot defenseman. He's really kind of fallen back on his productivity at a young age at only 28, but Dumba will be interesting. Troy Stetcher, Gavin Bayreuther, Calvin DeHaan, Michael Stone, and Scott Harrington round out this group of depth defensemen here available. You've also got a few more here, including Jordan Osterley, Alex Edler in LA. He's certainly not returning to the Kings, that's for sure. We know that Eric Johnson's not going back to Colorado. Jack Johnson likely isn't either. So it's an end of an era with the Johnsons, especially Eric, who was there just for so long, part of their Cup winner, but definitely wants to continue playing. You got Robert Hagg in Detroit, Connor Mackey in Arizona, Nico Mikla, who was a pickup by the Rangers at the deadline. He will certainly generate some interest for sure with that size. Patrick Nemeth, of course, another option here after not having a contract anymore after being bought out. You got Matt Irwin, Kyle Burrows, Nathan Beaulieu, and Andreas Englund rounding out the D-depth options here. Now, looking at centers, you got two of the top three centers may not even play this year with Patrice Bergeron and David Krejci. A lot of people are expecting them to not return. There's word Krejci could go back to Europe and play in Czechia. We'll see. Max Domi is an interesting choice. Dallas, we know he's not returning there. But after a 56-point campaign, he can also play the wing. I think he'll have a decent amount of options and interest. JT Compher, likely not heading back to Colorado either. It seems like he's priced himself out after a career year, 52 points, but still an interesting choice. Same with Evan Rodriguez. He only signed a one-year deal last year. Curious to see where he ends up. Jonathan Toews, former captain of the Blackhawks, is on the market. We don't know for sure if he's going to play, but it won't be in Chicago if he does. There was previously linked some interest with the Oilers. They do have a very, very tight cap situation, so I'll be curious to see what happens there. Ryan O'Reilly, there's some talk he might stay with the Leafs. They have so many decisions to make that are almost more important than O'Reilly when it comes to Matthews and Nylander that I do wonder if with some of these guys in Toronto, patience might wear thin, and they may move on just because they need to secure a contract before they might be able to get a solid answer. But O'Reilly will be tough for them to keep, but something they're looking at. Jonathan Drouin, definitely not heading back to Montreal, but I'm not sure where he goes. I would think limited interest there. Nick Bjugstad and Eric Stahl round out this first group of centers. So it goes to show you the center depth this year in free agency, not overly deep at all. We do have a few more, though, including Pius Suter in Detroit, Derek Brassard in Ottawa. Brassard has made it known he will only play with the Sens at this point or he's going to retire. He suffered a major injury at the end of last season, and if he's not going to play, if the Sens don't want to sign him or don't think he can compete anymore, then he'll likely hang him up. I would say he might go to Camp Ottawa on a PTO like last year, but we'll see. Lars Eller, Nola Cherry, Paul Stastny, also more veteran options there. I wonder what happens with Stastny in Carolina. Cherry, there's some interest in Toronto, but hard to say what happens there. You got Nick Bonino, Thomas Nosek, Teddy Bluger, Alex Belzil, and Pierre-Edouard Bellemare also here on the center position. Rounding out the group of UFA centers, you get Patrick Brown, Derek Stepan, who's been in Carolina for a couple of years now. We'll see what happens there. Chris Tierney finished in Montreal. I don't know if there'll be much interest there. Dylan Gambrell not returning to Ottawa, so he'll be available. Jason Megna, Luke Glendening, Logan Brown, who was not qualified by the Blues, so he's a UFA now. Lane Peterson, Radim Zahorna, and Darren Helm. I think Helm might be retiring as far as what I've heard, but we'll see, although these are basically all potential fourth-line options. Not a great deal of real, strong offensive talent or depth here in the center position of this year's crop of UFAs. To the wingers, and these are players on the left wing that are primarily left wingers, but sometimes a lot of these guys play both sides. You got Michael Bunting in Toronto, an interesting case there. I know he'd love to stay with his hometown team, but can they afford to keep him is a big question. Thomas Tatar with the Devils, he's likely not returning after all the other moves they've made. I think fair to say they've upgraded on him. Same with Zucker in Pittsburgh. I do wonder what that means for him with the other moves that Pittsburgh's made, bringing in Riley Smith. So a couple of productive guys there that could be real helpful between these top three. Like there's some decent options there. Get Connor Sheary, Washington. Zach Parise may be retiring. It's not quite clear yet. The Islanders are looking for clarity on that. He won't play elsewhere, though, unlikely. Kerfoot in Toronto, likely not returning to the Leafs. Tyler Bertuzzi will be interesting. His point totals are low, but he'll be one of the more coveted players for sure. 30 points in 50 games and a good playoff run with Boston. James Van Riemsdyk can still be a helpful third-line scorer, play good around the net, making the big money like he did before, but he can still contribute if he's going to continue. Nyquist in Minnesota, likely can get a short-term deal somewhere. Ryan Donato, actually, for 27 points for him at age 27, it was actually a nice upgrade, so I would think that Donato should be able to get a little more security this time around. Miles Wood not returning to New Jersey. He could be a good bottom six option who can play physical and produce some offense for a team that is looking for that. You had Nick Ritchie in Calgary. Again, another player who's bounced around a fair bit and had some success, so curious to see where he goes. You've also got Vlad Nemestikov, Matthias Janmark, Matt Nieto, Danton Heinen, Andrew Cogliano, Milan Lucic, who's rumored to be going to Boston, Tyler Mott, Derek Grant, Adam Ernie, Jujhar Khaira, Axel Jonsson-Falaby, and Zach Aston Reese with the Leafs, all on expiring contracts. A lot of these guys likely don't return to their existing clubs. You never know. There's some talk that Cogliano and the Avalanche are talking and trying to see, but it's going to be tough for them to squeeze him in as much as they would like to. The rest of them, it's really debatable. That is kind of where things stand here. On the left wingers, there is a few more depth options available through this UFA process, and those options include Devin Shore, Brendan Lemieux, Zach Sanford, Kiefer Bellows, and Dryden Hunt. And to be honest, it's debatable if any or many of those guys are even NHLers, at least not regular NHLers at this point in their career. So as you can see, like I said, the depth options kind of fade quickly. There's not a ton out there right now. Players that are primarily on the right side, you get Alex Killorn in Tampa. They are trying hard to keep him on a long-term deal, but at this age of 33, I think they're trying to extend him out 7-8 years to get the AAV down, but doesn't sound like that's what he wants to do. So for the first time, we might actually see Killorn leave. Patrick Kane and Vladimir Tarasenko are going to be very interesting. I would suspect that there's a good chance that the Rangers don't re-sign them, especially Tarasenko. Kane, I wouldn't be shocked if teams wait and maybe he doesn't sign until after the season starts. So see how his recovery goes, because he did have a big hip surgery. But we'll see if a team takes a chance there. But certainly this is some higher-end right wingers that are certainly available. Certainly we'll be curious to see where they end up and what they end up getting paid. Phil Kessel in Vegas, I don't see him returning there, but he can contribute somewhere, I'm sure. Pierre Engvall had a good, solid contribution with the Islanders. I think they might have interest to bring him back, but I don't know that they can really. Jesper Fast should be a decent option as well out of Carolina. 31 years old, probably looking at a multi-year deal. Oscar Sundqvist, Corey Perry just signed to Chicago. He's no longer a UFA. Signed 1 year, $4 million, which is a bit absurd, but we know that the Blackhawks are trying to hit the salary cap floor and overpaying veteran players. So that's not a huge shock. Josh Bailey's a UFA now after being bought out by Chicago after the trade from the Islanders. So it'll be interesting to see where he goes. He probably signs a 1 year deal. I would suspect that $1 million or less to get Garnet Hathaway with the Bruins will be interesting. He could certainly help a team. Trevor Lewis and Tyler Pitlick are some more depth options, but as we can see here, like you start this list with some higher end talent, Killorn, Kane, Tarasenko, and then it kind of falls off. You get Kessel, Engvall, Fast, and then now you're down to veterans that don't really score a whole lot of goals. Then we have our next slide takes us into Josh Levo, Craig Smith, Ryan Reeves, Sam Gagner, Julian Gauthier, Brett Ritchie, Josh Archibald, Austin Watson, Vinny Hinostroza, Saku Maenalainen, Alex Chiasson, and Kiviranta in Dallas. So certainly, like I said, not really a ton of goal-scoring depth there. I mean, once you get past the first handful of right wingers, there's really not much on the market now. Of course, besides this, there is a few more depth options, and then that will wrap up our list of free agents. And the few that are left include Carson Kuhlman, Ryan Carpenter, Zach Kassian, who was also bought out, and then Wayne Simmons in Toronto, which is debatable. How many of these guys? I could see Kuhlman probably getting a contract. I'm not sure about Simmons. Kassian might catch on somewhere. It's hard to say, but as we can see, not a ton of depth, and it's going to be interesting to see how teams go about things and why we might see more trades even leading into the early part of July because of the lack of options on the free agent market. So that is your ultimate guide to NHL free agency, broken down by position. Hopefully we have lots of interesting things to talk about as these players sign new contracts, many of which will be changing teams here in the coming days. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.